Welcome to another episode of Consent Dojo, where we're going to build our muscles of making consent, because this is something that we need to practice on. And today I'm delighted to have somebody who's going to educate me on things that I don't really know much about, which is why I invited Vahavta, and I'm going to slaughter your name every time I say this.
You got it. You got it perfectly.
Ah, and I am here to learn. Consent Dojo is not structured for me to teach because consent is both simple and complex, straightforward and nuanced, and it's a continual practice, much like staying fit. Uh, if you don't start with it, you're not, if you don't ever do it, you're never going to get fit. And if you don't keep up your fitness, you also get, unfit. So this is an area in which I am absolutely at a freshman level. So I'm very much looking forward to this. I would like to uh, turn the conversation over to you, and I will be piping in with questions, and because I'm the freshman here.
Fabulous. Well, thank you so much, Midori. I'm so glad to be here. And thank you to Mr. Greg for doing the tech wizardry that neither of us know how to do. I'll start by saying that obviously I'm sporting a bit of a different look here. And that is partially because this is going on YouTube later. And while I am happy in closed contexts to talk about some of this stuff with my face showing, I have also had instances of people taking my image and posting it places without consent. So one of the ways that we are able to deal with that sort of thing now in the Zoom world is by using all sorts of avatars. I considered being a cat, like the lawyer guy from the beginning of the pandemic who didn't know how to turn his off, but I found this, decided I would do this instead. So that's why I am animated today. But yes, I'm here largely to talk about chronic illness and consent and to give a little bit of my story there. I've been involved in the community for a decade now, and I was actually chronically ill when I started, but I didn't know that at the time. Yes.
Not everyone watching Consent Dojo may be familiar with communities that we might be referring to.
Fabulous. Okay, so in various kinds of sex positive communities for the past decade. And I always had symptoms that were part of a chronic illness, but I didn't realize that. I kind of thought that everybody was experiencing the same kinds of body things that I was. And since then, I have had several different limitations progress and started to learn more about disability and about chronic illness and advocacy in those spaces. So I want to say that when I say chronic illness, what I'm referring to there is any kind of medical condition that's going to last, we'll say a year or more, but it's usually something where you're not working towards a cure, you're working towards managing symptoms. There's some expectation of persistence and something that's going to be long lasting in its effects in some way. And for me, I consider chronic illness in the umbrella of disability. Not everyone does. So if I say disability and you are here listening because of chronic illness, try to just change out the words. But the reason I do that is because I operate off of a disability model that says that the things that we think of as disabling are simply limitations, and they only become disability because we live in a society that isn't structured towards making things doable for everyone. And so with chronic illness, the fact that our society is largely structured around capitalism and around productive ongoing work can make chronic illness a disability. So that's where I'm coming from when I say that, just to give the overall window. because of the avatar, you can't see when I'm stopping to take a drink of water, but if I go quiet for a second, that's what's happening.
Got it. Yeah, I'm sure that like in nanoseconds, the avatar technology will be too creepily accurate.
Oh, yeah. In fact, it already is. Oh, here's something I didn't even think we would talk about. But here we go. Since you just said that, yeah, there's a problem happening in streaming communities right now where people are making deep fake videos, so fake videos using the AI technology of largely female presenting streamers in compromising positions and using those as blackmail. Yeah, and I think in the next few years, that's something that we're all going to have to confront in various ways. So technology is a tool for good and evil, most certainly. But anyway, on the theme of consent. So I've been thinking about the various ways that chronic illness and consent interact. And there are all these consent models we hear are taught. And I was taught one of being enthusiastic, of being fully informed, of being adult. These are the things that it takes to consent. And as a starting model, I think that's very good. I think that, that comes from a place of understanding and good intention. And I also think that it doesn't apply to all people. Hold on before pitchforks. The reason for that being the way that we think of what fully informed is and the way we think of what enthusiastic is. Now, enthusiasm, depending on how you define it, that may be something that holds no issue for anyone. But if you define enthusiasm as being eager, as showing that eagerness through, yeah, excitement, partying, smiling, I'm, hell yeah, let's do the thing. There are days when I'm going to have that, but there are days when I am most certainly not, whether that's because I am not able to because of fatigue and pain and nausea and various other symptoms, or it's because I know that later on I may be interested in sexual activity, or the way that I've said it before is that I'm interested in theory. But in practice, I know that perhaps at the beginning, it's not going to be something I'm super into because I'm more focused on those symptoms that are limiting me. This isn't to say that anybody should ever push through a situation that they don't want to be in. When I say enthusiastic in theory, I'm referring to encounters that I do want to be there for, but that desire maybe isn't coming through in any kind of visual display or in my voice. So that's the big first place I see a conflict between that model. Enthusiasm is subjective. Yeah.
I'm going to pop in on that one because I also get a little bit of, or a lot of allergic hives to the enthusiastic.
Mm.
And like so many of these phrases, it all comes from good intent, of course. But yeah, I'm not comfortable with enthusiastic either. And the phrase that I've been using, and this is just stuff that I teach and it doesn't apply to everyone, I just like it, is engaged collaborative consent. Because, okay, so like food model, right? Let's say if I've never had haggis and I'm going to a Highland festival with my stepsister, this actually happened. And for those of you who don't know what haggis is, it's food. It is a form of food. And there I am at the festival, and she's like, "Want to try some haggis?" I said, "Sure." I can't say I was enthusiastic because I had no idea what I was getting into. But I was engaged. I had autonomy enough to make up my own mind that this could really suck, but that's part of the adventure. So I was engaged and collaborative in that, well, I suppose she would have held my hair up if I needed to afterwards. but it turned out I actually really liked it. So yeah, enthusiastic. And I think the term enthusiastic can get confusing if, I mean, how am I supposed to be enthusiastic about something I've never tried? Or maybe I'm really into the idea of doing this thing with you, but not with you. Or I had a bad time with it before, but I'm willing to see if it changes this time. That wouldn't be enthusiastic, but I'd have agency, autonomy, and agreement. So, oh, they dropped out, which means the signal is wobbly. So she will be right back. Haggis being food is debatable. Yeah, subjectivity of enthusiasm, referring to the autism masking, not the haggis. Okay. Let's see. I think I missed a thing here. I wonder if you can or will cover enthusiastic consent in the context of autistic masking and how to navigate that, asking as a person who themselves autistic and masks. I actually have an episode in my Patreon by John Pendle, who's a friend of mine, and he's a personal coach. He is a life coach, and he's also autistic and coaches around autism, queerness, kink, intersections of all that. And he did a lovely presentation in my Patreon. If Mr. Greg has bandwidth, we might be able to get that. We also had John Pendle presenting to this last weekend. I taught or facilitated 2 full days for therapists and coaches on being kink informed and being good to their clients and understanding about kink. And one of the 2-hour sections was covered by John Pendle, who discussed that. So he's also a resource as well. And I invited him onto my Patreon because I didn't know anything about it. And I had him teach me and the attendees all along. So I hope you'll take a look at that. Yeah, let's see. Oh, thank you, Mr. Greg. Video, Intersecting Spectrums, Autism and Kink, Life and Work of John Pendle. And he is also available as a coach. And I wonder if I need to send another invite here. Let me try this again. Pardon me while I make an email invitation to our lovely guest. I think they're having some signal issues today. Okay, this should be able to hear, hopefully see this. I'm back. So the link to the episode is in the chat. And thank you for subscribing to my Patreon. Really appreciate it. Aside, my support that all my Patreon citizens of Planet Midori gives me allows me to do things like creating Consent Dojo and offer it for free to the public. Yep.
Hi there. Sorry about that.
We're back.
I'm back. I'm trying to get my avatar launched again, but I am here.
Okay, I was chit-chatting. Oh, and somebody asked about if you were going to be covering anything around autism, and I actually had a lovely guest, John Pendle, who spoke about that in my Patreon as well as to my therapist training program. So I made reference to that.
Oh, fabulous. Yeah, I saw that right before it booted me off. That talking about masking and how certain kinds of neurodivergency just don't show enthusiasm the same way, and people are forced to mask and put on, what we might call a normative reaction in certain situations. But that's exhausting and that's not fun. And when you're intimate, you don't want to be thinking about, how do I appear as if I'm not someone who I am. So I think that's another way in which the enthusiasm thing just doesn't work. But yeah, you said engaged, you were talking about the haggis. And so I was going to ask what engaged meant to you. So no, autonomous decision, is that where you were
Yeah,
going with
engaged
I was engaged?
that that I am making a decision with autonomy, and I am interested, engaged in, like, I'm interested. This is something
Yeah.
that I am seeking for an experience. And so that leaves kind of an uh, door open for an area open for, I might not like it,
Yeah,
but
and I think that like curiosity is something that we could use so much more of in intimate spaces anyway, because I think that's a way that we listen to each other and each other's bodies better, is from a space of curiosity. Yeah, so I like engaged, and I've also heard empowered to mean pretty much the same thing. Because there is this concern with enthusiasm of, well, is somebody just going to go ahead because they feel they have to and say, either fake enthusiasm or say, well, while I'm not enthusiastic, like, let's go ahead anyway. So empowered being coming from a place where you feel like you don't have to go ahead. And then also, I've just heard the idea of affirmative, and that people engage in sexual encounters for all sorts of different reasons, and not all of them may have to do with enthusiasm, and that's still valid. You can, want to feel close to a partner for them. And I think that's valid. I think that's a way that some people engage in love languages that may not show the same kind of enthusiasm. You can still be enthusiastic about the idea.
I was also thinking about, there's a particular little corner of kink, BDSM, uh bodily and erotic encounters that may be scary, and we intentionally go there, like,
Absolutely. Yeah. You may want to engage in something you're not sure if you're going to like. And I like to leave room for that being valid too. It's a different kind of curiosity.
curiosity. I like that. Yeah, I'm going to pause just a moment if you're in a good pause place, and
Go for it.
let's look at some questions. Uh, oh, okay, this one. I've heard somebody say before, I'm not enthusiastic about cleaning the refrigerator, but I still do it because it's necessary and it's important to quality of life. You know, I've gone for a long time without cleaning the fridge. Yeah. Yeah, playing is more interesting than cleaning the fridge. I mean, unless it's like a DS scene in which, you will, with a brush strapped to your head. Now, there's a way to clean a fridge. Yeah. There are aspects of relationship that feel similar to me. I'm not enthused to do them, but they're a significant portion of life. Would that then fall under engaged collaborative consent models? For me, it would. What do you say?
Yeah, for me it would too. If it's something where even if you're not enthused about the activity, it's part of the life and relationships you want to build. I think that's consent,
Now, I
personally.
just want to be clear that me cleaning the fridge is never going to be kinky. Never. However, somebody else cleaning the fridge for me while I'm in boss lady mode with my feet up, with a glass of wine, that's kinky.
There you go.
Mhm.
I am not a boss lady mode person, but I do consent to anyone wanting to clean my fridge. We can talk about that.
Yes. Let's see. Here's another one. A previous partner with fibro and I had a standing agreement that should would tell me when, oh, she would tell me when she was requesting a scene for therapeutic reasons versus not. I really value that transparency and the trust it helped build. Now, this is interesting. Comment on this, please. I'd love to know your take.
Yeah, no, I love the idea of being upfront about intention, whether that is play or just, I want to make out for a while to take my mind off things. I think that's another way of making a sexual encounter better and of letting your partner know what you want to get out of it. And I think that can take a great deal of trust. So, more power to you and that partner for being able to have those conversations. Yeah, I love the idea of more people being open about their
Yeah,
intentions and goals.
that's beautiful communication. Another one comments, there seems to be a duality of consent where your brain's saying yes, 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 but your body's saying nope.
Absolutely. And that is a big thing with chronic illness. And there's a balance because there's a place where I'm going to want to push past all of the body nopes because the body nopes are just on a cycle that my mind and my heart aren't. It may be a side effect of a medication that I took 2 hours before and wasn't considering any kind of interaction at that point, and now I want it, but the body effect is happening, whether that's nausea or pain or a joint locking up. I think the more that we can be open and say, yes, I want to go ahead, just so you know, I've got this thing going on, the better. I've absolutely had to stop encounters before I wanted to because of symptoms and say, like I'm not able to be here and be present because this is happening, and or I might vomit. If you continue, we probably don't want that. Your own limits may vary, people who are listening with that. But yeah, there is that duality. And so you have to kind of come up with the balance of when can I go ahead anyway and try and either ignore or work around a limitation, and when is that limitation going to stop an ability to maybe be fully engaged, maybe to fully have the mental presence to consent to a new thing, which is definitely something I want to talk about some more. And in those cases, sometimes if you have those conversations about goal and objective and what you want to get out of something, you can find another way there. So if you're trying to do something for intimacy where your body is not letting you, maybe there is a route to intimacy that comes through conversation. If it's for, fun and distraction, while it may not be ideal to go put on some music that you really like and just hang out together jamming, maybe that can bridge the gap for the time being while the body note is happening. That was a whole lot I just said.
No, it's great. It also got me thinking about situations, because I like this duality comment the person made, where there are times when, and I've had shorter periods of injury or limitations, not chronic, but I'm thinking of when my body's yes, 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 and my mind's like nope, which led me to thinking about internal consent with two Midoris, the Midori now and Midori future. And it's kind of like the marshmallow test of kink, I suppose, for those of you who are familiar with the marshmallow test and patience and delayed gratification. Because I might now, like, I'm hot, I'm bothered, I'm excited about something, and then the future me is going, you're going to be suffering tomorrow and for several days. I know Midori today. I know you're hot for this and you don't want to listen to me, but I am Midori future.
I'll sometimes have that happen in the opposite direction too, where I'm like, Future Vahavta is going to be real pleased that I went ahead and tried this. And so maybe that's going to be what allows me to open that curiosity. And then I will also have the moments you are speaking of where it's like, oh, I really want to. And also, this is going to put me in bed for the next 3 days. And that's a good bridge to the fully informed question, because something that I've been thinking about a lot is duty to inform partners of things like that, where going ahead with this is going to render me incapacitated or less functional in some way. Maybe that's a symptom that I don't want to talk about. Maybe that's something gastrointestinal that's going to be increased by certain activities, and I'm not necessarily wanting to bring that up. Does that infringe on the other party's ability to be fully informed? And I have a lot of mixed feelings on that, because I know that somebody you care about, it might not feel good to do something knowing that you're going to interrupt their life in some other way by doing so, even if they're fully okay with it. The line that I have ultimately fallen on that is that I don't think anyone ever has a duty to an obligation to disclose symptoms of chronic illness or disability. But if we go ahead, just so you know, I'm not going to be able to go out for the next few days. I'm probably going to be in bed. There are ways you can say that without having to disclose the more sensitive items. You're on mute.
Let me be devil's advocate, or rather role play the well-intended but naive potential play partner. So let's say you said that you might not be able to live life fully for the next 3 days. And at that point in negotiation, I might say, as not Midori, but fictional person, that, oh, what happens? Tell me, give me details. Maybe there's a way that we can work around it. So what's the deal? No, really, you can tell me about it.
Yeah, and then that comes to the other party's individual boundaries and how willing they are to move around and outside of that. So I might say something in that case along the lines of, well, I have a chronic illness and I've been dealing with this for many years now, and I'm comfortable with this. I have ways of moving things around in my schedule and using accommodations that work for me. But I just wanted you to be aware that I might not be up for going out in the next few days. If that ends up being something you're interested in, I just like to tell people ahead of time so that you don't feel like it's about you later. Might be one way that I could frame that.
Yeah, I could see in the moment where well-meaning or insensitive or both of continuing to push to ask for, so what's the disease and can you tell me about it? And I'm okay, let me really go for the asshole here.
Okay.
I'm really good with insert activity. I'm really good with this. You won't have a problem with me at all. I've never had anyone complain.
Well, let me first of all say to anybody listening who has a partner and might have partners who have chronic illness, try not to say things like that. In case that doesn't go without saying. But people do, and it's something you kind of get used to. People push, people feel they have a right to that information. Just like with anything else in consent, I might once or twice say, no, I don't feel comfortable with that. If somebody pushes past that, I'm probably going to take that as a sign that we're not going to be a good match. I would feel that if they can't respect that boundary in terms of what I'm willing to talk about, maybe they're not going to respect other boundaries. So not fun information, but possibly some worthwhile information.
Yeah, and in terms of the question asking and question answering, there's also privilege and power dynamic. There's a previous episode of Consent Dojo where Marla Renee Stewart and I talk about the pre-existing power dynamic of two people in a room talking. And the one with more social privilege and social capital might think nothing of, well, I ask and therefore I must receive an answer, and be put off that they didn't get an answer, which is part of ignorance in their privilege. And also to the other person, there's socialization around, well, you asked, I have to answer, or you asked, I have to change my answer to make you happy, which is a reality of how people behave. And that sort of having to have enough self-awareness to get past that is not the easiest thing.
No, setting boundaries and holding the boundaries is like not intuitive, or maybe just we're socialized out of it.
Somebody said chronic illness is a way to, where did it go? Chronic illness is a way to weed out some of the jerks quickly.
Yeah, that is an unfortunate truth. Absolutely.
Let's see. And oh, here's something else.
Oh boy, I'm not sure if you can hear me, but
I can hear you.
there's the internet.
Yep, I can hear you. From another attendee, would you suggest having separate safe words for stop because my condition is interfering versus stop because I've reached my limit, I'm not emotionally comfortable now? Or I guess that's just like the plain old activity-centered safe word.
Yeah, I mean, depending on whatever practices you use to let people know things need to stop. For me, because there's so many different symptom possibilities and they lead to different outcomes, whether that's we need to stop entirely versus this is a position switch versus let's just slow down a little bit. I will generally just say exactly what I need to happen, whether that's just let's stop and see if my pain flare goes down, or just I'm done for the night. But I have heard of people having different kinds of safe words for stop entirely versus stop, let's have a discussion about symptoms, or let's pause for me to check in with my body. That's a big one too, is when it comes to deciding if you can go ahead, you may have to pause and check in and evaluate your symptoms versus other times you've experienced them versus what you know different symptom triggers may be. So yeah, it's all very complicated. I think having a stop versus a pause that may be a stop, but let me check, can all be valuable.
Related to this, so before even getting to that, right? How much information is appropriate for somebody to ask about their other person's limitation or illness?
That's a really good question, because yeah, we had said, it's a good way to weed out jerks, but not everyone's a jerk. Sometimes people are, they're interested and they want to be more compassionate. They're asking not just because they feel they have a right to know, but they're asking because they want to make sure that you have a good experience. I think the way to navigate that is not to say, well, can you tell me about your illness? Can you tell me about being disabled? Just say, how does that affect you when you're with a partner? And let the other person lead from a place of what they think is relevant information. If they don't think it's relevant to the encounter, I don't think it is appropriate to ever say, can you just tell me more about daily life? You can say that, but if they say, no, like I'm not comfortable, don't push past that. It may be, depending on the activity, it may be a good idea to think about the different bodily mechanics and ask around those. Say, well, how much pressure is good for you? Say, what speed do you like best? Is there a certain sign that your body might give that I should change something? And to really focus on the activities versus the individual body, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and I've got a nice comment over here. Somebody saying, I identify on the top side of the slash, and the only time I feel owed detail about an illness is if the scene would potentially put me in a situation where I'd have to answer questions from first responders. And she might be frozen. Oh, you're back.
Oh, there I am. Yeah. And that's another complicated factor is if somebody is dealing with, let's say, tachycardia, they might have a heart rate response. In those cases, I do think that if you are ill and if you are somebody that has a tendency to need emergency assistance from time to time, that is something you need to disclose because the other party may be asked to give their legal name, and that could affect them in various ways. And it's, a balance between obligation. I don't think anyone's ever obligated versus what is respectful. And if you know there's a chance that you may need to see a medical professional in an emergency basis, I think it is respectful to let a partner know.
I also want to put in here that oftentimes the assumption might be that the knowledge of somebody's limitations and illness is that the person topping needs to know about the limitations of the person bottoming. That's one-sided because anyone could have limitations, disabilities, and chronic illness. And somebody who likes to throw a flogger who also might have fibro or chronic shoulder injury or what have you. So it is also likely that the person bottoming may have to be the one talking with a first responder
Yes.
or having a conversation with or just stopping the scene. So the person topping gets to have their own safe words, y'all.
For sure. Actually, for tops, that might be one of the times where having a illness specific safe word is even more relevant, just so you can be totally clear that, like, hey, this is nothing to do with the scene. Like, this is nothing to do with any kind of play or any kind of sexual encounter. This is totally my physical body. Give me a second before I can, fully communicate with you about what's going on, but it's not you. So yeah, I think that's a good idea, person who asked that.
In the model of negotiation that I teach, and I have the lovely Mr. Greg put up the link from my Patreon. The negotiation style that I teach is mutual, where everybody's answering the same question. So for folks who enjoy bottoming, I would highly suggest asking questions of the person who's going to be topping you, because you might want to know that, and it helps you to enjoy the scene right along with them. And people who top oftentimes don't get asked things, and it will totally score points.
Yeah, I would love it if more people in general would just talk about body limitations because it normalizes talking about it. Which I think is important. It's how we learn that there isn't such a normative body in general, normative mind in general. If we all asked more people about their limitations, we would have a better picture of, I think, what it is to exist in the world.
Maybe the normative should be, we all got limitations.
Oh, did I freeze?
I can still hear you. So let's see, let me look at some of the queries here. These are good. Let's see. And I'm going to wait a moment while they're going to come back, and let me read some of these.
Okay, at least it brought me back quickly that time.
Hi. Okay. So I've got,
When did I cut out?
oh, uh, when you realized that you were cutting out, you said something and then you dropped. So it's fine. Uh,
Uh,
the person who on the other side of the slash said, fair point. I do have things I get to disclose as a top. Uh, somebody asked, tips around how to navigate increasing self-awareness when being used to pushing limits, when being used to pushing limits in the vanilla world as somebody who's physically disabled. Often we are conditioned to endure things we do not want or that are physically painful, framed as good for us, i.e., physio. Uh, because of this, we don't always have a clear understanding of what our limits are in kink play. Or you can switch into, I need to endure this pain as a default autopilot.
yeah, that is a very good point. I keep bringing up now that it came up the first time, this idea of thinking about goals of an encounter and what your individual intentions are. Um, but I have found that with kink play comes into it a lot for me when I'm thinking about this. Is this something that I need to or want to endure? As I will check in with what my original intention was and whether that's just knowing for yourself or whether you are somebody who goes to a mantra or something of that and saying, okay, am I still here for the intimacy? Am I still getting that out of this? Can be a way of measuring that, because you're absolutely right. Being disabled is a real quick way to become conditioned to endure things that you don't want.
And that can also be in the enduring of the emotional pain as well as the physical pain.
Mm-hmm.
There's a good question here. When a partner with chronic illness says, let's not do this activity, is it okay? Or let's not do this particular activity. Is it okay as a partner to check and see if other activities are wanted or interesting? Or should it be taken as a blanket no? I find myself wanting to explore other options if the partner is okay with alternative ways of sharing intimacy.
Yeah, I think that is not actually a chronic illness question. I think that anytime anyone says, let's not do this activity, anyone could ask back, are you open to other suggestions of activities, or are you just wanting to chill out? Are you just wanting to have some alone time? I think that comes down to the individual partner, and it's something you can be proactive about. You can say, if you know that you're close to someone with chronic illness, you can say, if you are having to put a pause on something or not feeling up to something, are you okay with me suggesting alternatives? Ask them ahead of time.
And I suppose that could also be a answer to an unasked question as the
Mhm.
person who is having chronic illness to say, by the way, if I say no to something, please feel free to suggest alternatives.
That's something that I've had to discuss with my partner for sure. And that kind of goes to the concept of brain fog, which, if you're not familiar with brain fog, the best way I've heard it described is as like, when your internet's not working and you get the buffering circle. Brain fog is like your mind doing that. And it can be a symptom in and of itself. Unfortunately, more and more people are familiar with it from having long COVID. It can also be a side effect of a medication. And it is a form of impairment. It definitely impacts somebody's thinking. And so knowing that when I am foggy, I may not even remember that I have measures that can reduce pain. So I've asked my partner, if I seem like I'm in a lot of pain and that's all I'm thinking about, like, you can ask me if I have taken such and such a med. You can ask me if I would like a heating pad. So I've had to say that preemptively, knowing that at other times I may not be able to.
Now, this is with a situation of an existing partner. It gets more difficult or challenging with, as say, a pickup play.
Yes, it most certainly does, especially because brain fog can come and go so quickly for some of us. I have had a conversation fairly recently of someone who runs an event in an adult space, and they were having hesitancy over letting disabled folks into their event at all, particularly people who appeared to them to have some form of cognitive impairment. And they were wondering, can this person consent? And my suggestion there was just to ask, what does consenting mean to you? And ask someone if they can articulate what it means for them to consent. And if they can say, yeah, for me, that means that I want to be here and I want to be doing this with you. For me, I see that as an opening to ask more questions. If you are playing with somebody who has chronic illness or who might have some form of brain fog going on, whether temporary or otherwise, it does go to personal comfort. And if you can ask the questions that you need to feel comfortable as well. But generally, if somebody says, hey, I feel I can consent to this, I trust them personally.
Another question from the attendees. Oh, I am unmuted. Good. I really like this question from the event description that I hope gets answered. Where is the line on someone being able to offer consent? Kind of relates to what you just talked about.
Mhm.
Who gets to set that limit?
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, it's so complicated. It's so difficult. The person that gets to set the limit for me is the people who are involved. That might also mean, event hosts. If you're in an adult space, those people can set their own limits for who gets to consent. In turn, people with chronic illness may decide not to frequent some spaces if they are condescended to, infantilized, or treated like they cannot consent. I don't think that it is discriminatory for somebody to decide that, you know what, I don't feel like I can ask the questions that I need to be sure, and to kind of self-select out that way. But it all comes down to conversation, I think. Yeah, and just saying, are you here? Are you with me? Can you tell me about what you're interested in? Maybe it comes down to asking more open-ended questions and getting their description as opposed to just trusting that there is a mutual understanding. I think that goes for anyone, whether you're sick or not. Making sure you're on the same page.
You just said something that triggered another question for me. If going to a space or being in an environment where condescended upon, infantilized, etc., can you paint us a picture of some of the realities that a person with chronic illness may face? Paint us a picture of what happens.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'll say for me, I sometimes will wear a back brace, but I've heard of similar stories from people who are wheelchair users or cane users, that other people, whether they are event hosts or just kind of random passerbys, oh, actually, somebody just said this to us in the chat, was that mobility devices get touched without permission often. Different devices that people use to move through the world or that we wear, or even when it comes down to things like medication. I've had people grab bottle of pills out of my bag and bring it over to me. And those are all consent issues as well. I don't think it is ever appropriate to touch somebody else's mobility device without asking first. Oftentimes, wheelchair users will see that as an extension of themselves because it's how they get around the world. So one of the realities is that people will straight up just move your person and just decide what you need in order to manage a symptom in that moment. Another reality is I have had people come up to me and ask not me, but a partner, is she okay right now? Can she be doing this? And that, maybe just ask people themselves. I've seen people who, I know somebody locally who wears a port, a medication device that was surgically added so that medication goes directly into them. And it kind of sticks out of your chest a little bit. And somebody tried to stop a scene and said she can't be playing with that on when it is like surgically in her body. And so there's a question of, does this actually impact play? No. Why did you assume that it does? It all really comes down to assumptions, assuming that you know what is better for somebody than they can know for themselves.
Okay. So, not chronic illness person, however, small, Asian, cis female. Particularly when I was younger, I guess a little less now that I'm like a loud middle-aged lady. Particularly when I was younger, it was like a lot of people seemed to think that they could tell me, and they knew better than me. So there's definitely power dynamics there. Oh, and a few more comments in here on this. We can be called inspiring simply for being at a party. That can be deeply condescending.
Oh gosh, inspiration porn. Yes. In another facet of my life, I talk to writers and I talk about story. And I was talking recently about how to do disability representation. And there are so many stories in various forms of media where the only reason someone disabled is in it is so that we can show them getting cured. Yeah, as if there's not a value to them being in this story otherwise. And people translate that into real life. Yeah, that they'll say it's so inspiring that you still come out with this. And it's like, yeah, well, I have it for the rest of my life. So thank you, I guess. I never know how to respond.
Oh, wait. Let's see. Let me follow that up with, okay, so me playing that person. It's so inspiring to have you here. And then person is like, that's weird. Think it's condescending. And to which I said, but I'm celebrating you. And
right. Yeah. I'm empowering you. I care so much. This is inclusive, and it's not. Treating people like they are people is what is inclusive.
There's so much similarity right now. Some of the there's overlaps, right? Because I can just hear the oh, you're Asian, and we love everything. I love everything about your culture. And I'm like, well, that's offensive.
Yes. Oh gosh.
So that like tokenization, that's the word I'm looking for. Right? Other comments, folks will not look you in the eye if you're sitting in a wheelchair.
Yep. Yes. Or I think people don't realize how many ambulatory wheelchair users there are. How many people where on some days a wheelchair is the best way to conserve energy and to do what we want to do in the world, who can walk. But you might choose to have the energy to shower instead that day. What is referred to as by some as spoon theory, the idea that we have a limited number of spoons to use throughout the day, and maybe you have 5 to use, and showering takes 3 and cooking dinner takes 3. Obviously, you can't do both because you only have that number. So there are a lot of people who may use a cane or a wheelchair or some other mobility device some of the time who don't have to use it all of the time and will be approached and say, well, I saw you walking yesterday. Why are you doing that now? And that doesn't really have so much to do with consent, but it just annoys me. And so now I've shared it.
Yeah, good, good. I love spoon theory, you know? I mean, this is, are we allowed to, along with spoon theory, to carry a fork to stab people with?
I have a shirt that says no more spoons, only knives.
Oh my God. Earlier mentioned John Pendle also talks about spoon theory. You'll have to tell me where that shirt is because I think I need to get it to him. Let's see.
Oh, they're all over Etsy. All sorts of people make spoon knife related things.
Great. I'll have to look. Other great comments coming in here, y'all. I have no spoons today, only knives. So watch out. Another, carry a spatula to smack a condescending bitch. Yeah, yeah, uh-huh. Um, ignoramus repellents. Okay. And let's see. Oh, assuming assuming it's a medical kink situation.
Yeah, yeah. People who think that whatever kind of device you are using must actually be part of play. And that gets into the weeds on a whole other issue of fetishization. Um, there are the big one I go to that I see most frequently is amputee fetishists, where people who have disabilities will get messages from people that say, oh, I've always thought it would be so sexy to play with somebody with a prosthetic. And oh, it's so frustrating. It's so condescending, and it can be really harmful. And it can drive people away from spaces.
Oh, but let me play the asshole again. Well, why
Mm,
are you offended? I'm just attracted to people like you. It's a compliment.
right, right. It's the I love your culture. I
Mm.
I think that your people are just so wonderful. Okay, bye.
I'm finding interesting commonalities here that commonalities in eye rolling and barfing. Uh, and and indeed, somebody said disabled folks are often fetishized as well, and folks assume we are into the kink of being disabled, or yeah, assume of self fetishization, I guess. Yeah, yeah. Oh, and another fetishization equals biggest turn off. It just occurred to me that this was like 20 years ago, I think. I was at a big kink, and it was more of a leather conference, right? And big leather conference, and I was I was playing with a friend. I was topping and he was bottoming, and it was a takedown, resistance, kind of both bratty, bondage, and overpowering. Sounds fun, right? Are you, can you still hear
Yeah.
me? Making sure. Okay. So that's
Yeah,
the
I'm with you.
scene. Yep. And uh we're in like the corner dungeon. And so yeah, oh my God, I was such a brat of a top. First, first, I crawled under his chair from behind and uh and tied his shoelaces together,
Oh.
and yeah. And then I slid out from under the chair, and um I think I sat, oh, what was great about the arms of his chair was it was just positioned just right so I could like lay sexy across without like, so I was like totally eh. And then I and remember, it's like takedown struggle, funny. It was kind of kid-like scene, right?
Yeah.
Um almost it, almost kind of like role playing the bully that likes you.
Mm-hmm.
And so then I drag him out of the chair and I am up ropey. And then I sit in the chair and heavy sit in the chair. And then I roll over him with his chair. And we are laughing our asses off. I legs, I did bondage. I limited his movement. And then I was playing. We were having a great time, like totally
Mhm.
great time. Um, next day, at the big conference event, uh, and in this like big gathering, I think it was like a big class or something like that, people were telling me about how awful and terrible I was. And how could I be so abusive? And then my friend rolls in and going, "What? We were having fun."
Mhm.
And
Oh
here's
yeah, I mean, yeah.
and his reality is that people get all like walking on eggshells. He's heavy. I mean, like delightful, heavy sensation person, and very
Mhm.
good at. But yeah, he like doesn't get the play opportunities. We had so much fun, and then like I was called out for being abusive. It was such a baffling situation.
Well, part of that is because disabled people don't get their own sexuality. It's kind of, in any sort of situation where people are saying, oh, they can't have really wanted that with anyone, with any population.
Yeah,
It goes to the same, are you asking the person involved? Maybe you
yeah.
ask them, did you really want that? And if they say yes, then trust it.
The attainder of various people attending step to being unconsensually outraged for him. And I was so glad that he was there at the moment where he's like, fuck off.
Yeah. What's wrong with you?
Yeah, it really like took the joy of it off, and I needed aftercare from him. I'm going, and because he had experience dealing with that. And I, I was just a kid playing with another kid in a grown-up's body,
Mhm.
and it was confusing. And um, yeah, I was so glad that he was like, fuck off. Oh, let's see what else. Sorry, I just had to share that because as you were talking about this, I it was really coming back that morning after the scene.
Yeah, yeah. It's just another way of people deciding that they know better than the person involved. The I like how you said the non-consensual outrage. Yeah.
Let's see. Somebody else said, the joys of unsolicited input. For me, it's people who have a lot to say about dealing with ADHD symptoms or how to deal with diabetes or more mundane physical issues like degenerative disc disease or joint issues. Unsolicited input.
Hmm. Yeah, I've had to put on writings before. I'll put like rules of engagement and then I'll put please speak to your own experience, but I don't want any comments about how I should better handle mine.
Let's see. Comment. More more able-bodied folks need to learn to sit with their discomfort about how disabled folks express bodily autonomy and their sexuality. Mm.
Yeah.
Now, I know I've got some questions here. So let me see, what have I got here? Oh, in our some of our previous little pre-consent dojo conversation, the question of what does it mean to be an adult of sound mind? How can illness affect that? And let's go down that rabbit hole, shall we?
Yes, let's go down the rabbit hole. Yeah, so that has a little bit to do with the brain fog thing I was discussing. But I'm very anti the term safe, sane, and consensual at this point in time. I think that it has value as an educational tool, but the term sane can be one that excludes a number of people, because you'll see, I mean, you'll even see on dating profiles and things, people will say nobody who is mentally ill. And it's like, okay, why? And what do you mean by that? Because if we define sane as capable of, making rational decisions, well, who decides what rational is? Depression is not rational. Depression tells you that things are worse than they are, or that you're not worthy. And is that rational? Does that fit in our definition of sane? And so I get weird around that term. I also get weird around the term safe, because I don't think you can make anything fully safe. I think you can just make it safer. But yeah, to be an adult of sound mind is just such a vague term. And so those words like engaged, empowered,
The,
are more meaningful and apply to more people.
the adult of sound mind was also not too long ago a strategy used to incarcerate inconvenient family members.
Yeah. Yes, and it gets applied to people, the trans community. People will say, well, that person isn't of sound mind. Somebody who has been hospitalized and has been treated, people say, well, they're not of sound mind. Maybe they're more sound, quote unquote, than somebody who has never had any kind of treatment. It's not a useful term. It gets weaponized, it gets used to marginalize people, it gets used to count people out all the time. Sanity, what's sane? Who's sane? Who's sane? I don't know.
I'm a working artist. I am not of sound mind, because if I were boring.
Yes.
Oh. About safe, sane, and consensual, and I also want to share this with the viewers. Lighten up on safe, sane, consensual being some sort of rule to either adhere to or oppose, y'all. Why? Because the origin of safe, sane, consensual has more to do with politics and civil rights than it does about best practice of play. In the early 80s, safe, sane, and consensual was a slogan created in the National Leather Association as the big March on Washington for gay rights, the Stonewall big gay rights march in DC. I don't remember the exact year. And at that point, there's many mainstreaming or assimilationist, I guess. And this is before LGBTQI. There were gay and lesbian and suspicious bisexuals, never mind anyone else. But the powers that be of organizing these things informally didn't want any of kinky folks out there, because those people are going to make us look bad. We don't want any leather and kinky people. So the National Leather Association, their political and civil rights branch and thinkers, came up with a slogan that fit on a banner. Safe, sane, and consensual is a repeatable, fits on a banner political slogan to fight against in-group, and this is when people were upset with the word queer, y'all, in-group oppression. So keep in mind, please, safe, sane, and consensual was a political slogan towards liberation and stigmatization that we are now getting to increasingly enjoy. So it's an amazing part of history.
And I think I would love it if you taught it as that and not as a checklist. Then I do see more and more different consent models popping up. But yeah, as a slogan, you're right. Things that fit on a banner, things that get the idea across, but they're not meant to be rating systems.
Exactly. I personally like SC of salt, soda, and chocolate.
Same. I'm with you on that.
Because right after playing, it's like I suddenly want all the crunchy, salty thing, and I suddenly want all the sugary things, and I don't usually drink soda, but why is it that I want that Coke? And yeah.
Hmm.
Mm,
For me, it's salt. I'm
mm.
all about the salt. I never started eating salt and vinegar chips until I started
Oh,
playing. And
oh,
then it was like, this is the thing.
yeah, salt and vinegar. Okay, so our car sometimes has a vinegar in the washer fluid
Hmm.
because it's better. And I get hungry every time it rains, so I have to clean the window. Mm, yeah. Yeah. So sorry, digress on like salt. Crunchy, crunchy. Um, I should make a t-shirt like, like something, salt, soda, and chocolate, say SSC works for me. Um, Somebody said, I cannot stand toxic positivity either. Loads of people need to be reminded often that mental illness is that, and that uh and an illness and requires no shame. The big cheerleaders. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. And
I
toxic
saw a
positivity. Oh, sorry.
Oh no, go on, please.
That also goes into when people refer to us as being differently abled, um, and ask people their individual preferences for how they want to be referred to. But as a whole, disabled folks, whenever there's any research done on it, overwhelmingly prefer to be called disabled. And for me, it's because, yeah, I have different abilities. Everyone has different abilities. But when I'm using the word disabled, it's to tell you about the one I can't do right then. Like, it's not to tell you, like, oh, I just go about things differently. Okay, so does everyone else. Yeah, toxic positivity.
Here's a question. Let's see. Any suggestions for a therapist navigating conversations with an individual with chronic illness who is trying to determine if there is a boundary violation, or if there was consent, it just wasn't enthusiastic, or if there was consent, it just wasn't enthusiastic per se. So, okay. A therapist navigating a conversation with an individual with chronic illness who's trying to determine, I assume the person, the
Mhm.
client, determine if there's a boundary violation. I feel like
Well,
there's not enough information.
yeah, I am not a therapist. So with that firmly in front of this, I would challenge you to remove chronic illness from that sentence and ask you how you would help any other client determine if their boundaries had been crossed, and go from there.
Good point. Uh, and since neither of us are therapists, I may recommend to the therapist of reaching out to other uh, kink aware professional therapists
Hmm.
and with experience on this. And I'm betting also that the NCSF, National Coalition Sexual Freedom, may also have resources in terms of very well informed, far better than either of us, informed colleagues of yours. So I apologize that's, yeah, that we can't go any further of your answer of remove the word chronic illness, conversation with individual who's trying to determine if there's a boundary violation. Good point. Let's see. Hey, I got a fun one for you.
Okay.
Do you have a consent game that you like to play?
A consent game. Let me ask you that first, because I think I might need an example of a consent game.
Okay. Um, Here's a consent game that Marcia B taught me, and we used to teach together on this, is, the game of yes and, that it's
Hmm.
no but. It's also called the ridiculous ask. And the game is, I ask you a ridiculous thing, and then you answer something that you probably, hopefully say no to, and then you come back with no, but a different offer, right?
Mhm.
So I that's like an idea of a game. So like ask me a ridiculous thing. And it doesn't have to be kink, it can be anything.
Okay, do you want to make sandwiches on the roof tonight?
No, but I'd like to sit on the roof and watch the stars with you.
Oh, so you could apply the same thing here too, is you could say, are you able to run at 1,000,000 miles an hour? And someone could say, no, but I like hanging out on the couch just as much. Or they could say, no, but I can stroll with you through the park all day long. Um, yeah, you could apply the same thing to ability, most certainly.
Yeah, I love that no but game because it eventually gets like um ridiculous and a lot of fun.
Hmm.
Yeah. So that's a fun game. And for those of you who are watching, that's also a fun game to play with kids and teach your kids and not in the kink context, but uh gamifying quick thinking, desire checking, and ability to say no.
Which is so important that we teach children because at least when I was a kid, tickling is the big example that we teach people to ignore no's, and that way if someone asks you, are you ticklish, they're probably about to tickle you no matter what you say.
Yeah.
So
Oh,
teaching kids otherwise is
I'm gonna make a ridiculous ask of you in that no but game.
okay.
Okay. I want to go to the circus with both of us dressed as inflatable sad clowns.
No, thanks, but I would be happy to go to the circus with you normally. And
Would
I'm comfortable with you dressing as a sad clown.
you come with me dressed that way?
What a time for my internet to go out again. Oh, if you can still hear
I
me,
hear
hopefully
you.
I'll be able to hear you.
I
There
see
you
in
are.
you. Yeah. Oh, did you say you'd be up for at least me being dressed as a sad clown?
Yes. Yes, that is what I said.
Okay, so we can go to the circus, yay, and at least I can bring my clown outfit out. And
And I will celebrate your clown outfit. I will take pictures of you in the clown outfit.
I actually do have a clown outfit.
Fantastic.
It's not a sound, it's more like a killer ambiguous clown. Yeah.
Nothing like an ambiguous clown at the circus.
Yeah. And somehow all horror movies with circuses have like the clown, right? Let's see what else I've got here. Okay. I've got something from somebody else. I've only just recently accepted that I am a young person. Tomorrow's my 32nd birthday. Happy birthday! With chronic illness. And I have, quote, earned, unquote, what I call a VIP parking pass. Others call it a handicap placard. My question is, how do I best communicate with potential new partners about my chronic illness when my imposter syndrome is often stronger than my ability to uphold boundaries sometimes?
Yeah, so that is a big question, and I think something that a lot of us deal with, particularly those of us who were socialized as women, with imposter syndrome and boundaries and communication. I think that particularly if you're dealing with any kind of brain fog, using multiple modes of communication. I have seen people write quote unquote user manuals that discuss their different symptoms and the way it could impact things. And then you can send that link and you don't have to see their reaction, and I can have that conversation in a way where you can think about the answers more clearly.
Actually, the user manual idea, I've had all sorts of, well, a small handful of friends disabled and not disabled, put together, and this was by another friend's suggestion, their own user manual around, they were doing long-term DS scenes, and by long term, it was like 3-day long DS scenes,
Mm-hmm.
and user manual, which also then included uh, medical as well as physical limitation, dietary limitations, as well as the things that turned them on.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And then you
And
can put, I'm going to want you to have the salt and vinegar chips available for when we're done.
one of them, their role play was a 3-day long role play as sex bot. So you need to recharge them, which means sleepy time. So isn't that cute,
How creative.
right? Yeah, it's kind of like D&D talents used for good, along with technical writing. Yeah. Now, I have the reality, speaking of limits, that we're approaching the 90 minutes,
Mm-hmm.
and spoons are a real thing, me
Yes.
as well. Uh, yeah, so I would like to turn to our lovely attendees, and if you would care to, dear live attendees, put something in the chat about something that you gained out of our conversation, appreciation for our lovely guest, and yeah, there you go. Yeah. So that would be lovely because I learned a lot in this. And what I didn't realize was that there's a lot of overlap and similar experience with
Mm-hmm.
the different kinds of marginalization.
For sure.
Yeah.
There was one question I saw earlier while people are typing that I wanted to share some thoughts on, which it was asked particularly pertaining to people who are hard of hearing or deaf. But it was just, is it the responsibility of the event host to establish an accommodating space for someone? And my answer for this, for any disability, is that it isn't their event host responsibility to establish it, but it is their responsibility to communicate if it is there or not. Um, if somewhere says that they are, wheelchair accessible, but really that's just to get in the door, and to get to the bathrooms you have to go up some stairs, then that's not helpful. It's way more helpful to just say, you can't access the bathrooms using a wheelchair, and then someone knows if they can come or not.
Okay.
It's all about communication.
Yeah. And somebody said, I love the user manual idea. Love the idea of different sets of safe words for disabilities. Knowledge is power. Thank you both. I always love hearing new perspectives.
Woo!
Yeah, stronger understanding of new contexts to think of disabilities. Heart sign. Yeah. Let's see. Last few minutes, y'all. I just really appreciate what you, as I'm a new sexuality educator who lives with chronic pain, and I just want to talk with you more. Thank you so much. Somebody who wants to talk with you
Let's talk
more,
more. I
how
love
should
talking more.
yeah, how would you want people to find you?
So I have a newsletter that is vahavta.substack.com. I believe you can leave comments on there. I'm not sure if there's a way to private message me or not, but you can email me at, I'll put this in the chat, vahavtainpictures@gmail.com. And anybody who is viewing this later, feel free to do the same. I may take a day or two to respond to you, but I would love to chat more.
Great. So for those who'd like to continue the discussion, please. Uh, I, I, I didn't know you before. What was it? A class that you presented for,
You
was it
went,
Wicked Grounds?
it was for Wicked Grounds, yeah.
Yeah. And I reached out and said, you're really interesting. Will you come talk to my
Oh
people?
no, we froze again.
Oops, I can hear you. Hello, hello. Hi,
There you are.
hi. Okay. So I didn't know of you before. We've actually not physically met, I think.
We haven't.
Okay. I mean, a lot of events, we could have been in the same area, you know. Uh, but the class was so interesting. I really enjoyed your insight. So unsolicited, I said, hi, I'm Midori. Could you come talk to me and Paul? So I'm so
And I
glad
was
that
so pleased. And it's been so lovely to get to do this. And it's such a cool system of talks. So
neat.
really honored to be part of it.
And it's great for me to be able to come from I I know nothing. Tell me more. Let's see. Thank you both for having me. Oh, here we go. Things uh subscribe info. Thanks for taking your time, both of you, and tech support to Mr. Greg. Thank
Thank
you
you, Mr.
both.
Rick.
Yeah, having me. I appreciate the history lesson as well as the overall in-depth dive into chronic illness and consent. I love it. Thank you for normalizing chronic illness and kink and for providing such a nuanced take on consent. Thank you both for having this discussion. As somebody who has a chronic condition, I appreciate your acknowledgement of brain fog and spoons. I appreciate your work. I'm glad you can do it because I don't have the spoons for it. LOL. That's great. Thanks, Midori. Love everything that you do. Oh, you're welcome. Uh, Lovely to hear such great insight to help me as a chronically ill individual. This was great. As a new to kink and newly disabled person, this gives me hope for having my needs accommodated during some kinky good times. Yeah.
Oh yeah. You can have good play, you can have good sex, you get to have it with creative people sometimes, and that becomes more apparent because of the good litmus test that is, can you work with my limitations? And it's awesome. So please don't let being disabled, being ill, stop you from pursuing the things that you want to.
Thank you so much. And to all the viewers out there, please go out there and try consent muscles. All right. Hey, I'm going to put this video on YouTube. I'll also be sending it to you. So please, please, please follow our lovely guest. And I, when I, by the way, when I hang up, it's the video is going to, we're going to lose our connection too, just so you know.
Well, thank you
Okay.
so much for having me, and thank you to all of you for coming and asking such great questions and being here.
Yay. Mwah. I see some of you all, hopefully a lot more of you all in my Patreon and follow Vahavta. Okay.
Good night.
Bye.